are we ready for a little variety in our spring games and have teams going against each other? This is the College Game Day podcast. Rece Davis and Ian Fitzsimmons here. Number of coaching changes going on at the college basketball level, and Pete has to chase down all of those. But Fitzy, the quarter zip, while I'm not offended by in the least, I mean, the great Kyle Whittingham in Utah, you're rocking some Utah gear that I'm sure you paid full price for at the campus bookstore. But it is also a rival school to your daughter. Now, how is she going to feel when she sees Dan Lanning employee now? How is she going to feel when she looks up and sees you rocking the Utes red, the mighty Utah student section?
One, RD, nothing ever gets by you, big bro. Good to see you. Tuscaloosa is remarkable. It's a phenomenal place along with Five. Chris Settings and the boys do a great job. I did not realize the Ute logo, one was going to be on the old YouTube channel, right? On the old TV.
Yeah.
And it was the first clean thing that I found, right? So let's be honest. You are
25 years I've known you and not a lot's changed.
Yeah, look, I mean, half my life.
Maybe longer, I don't know.
You've been trying to get me to do the right thing, and you have failed miserably because Rece is the ultimate pro. He is showered, he's shaved, the lettuce is perfect, it is slick romaine, there's not a hair out of place. Me, radio guy, what's clean? Throw on the hat. This beard is not even New York Yankee legal as far as well-groomed. So there you go. This is off-season Fitz you're getting right here.
Well, okay, but you know what? I see you when you're working the sidelines in football, and you've come a long way. I think now that you are not just wearing sneakers on the sideline. You're wearing shoes. You're wearing shoes you can move in, right? You're wearing I don't like to give away brands because they're not giving me free shoes, but there are those Cole Haan dress shoes that feel a lot like sneakers. You were wearing those for a while.
Hold on a minute. You pressured me.
I did.
Into one game, the national championship in Houston. I wore what you call adult shoes. And I will never forget, third quarter, still a close game, right? You know, that we just kicked Washington and Michigan. And you looked over and you didn't look at my eye. I saw you staring at my feet. You gave me a thumbs up. And I just shook my head because my feet hurt after that. So, hey, look, I am still going sneaks. I will have the Jay Hilburn suit on. And but I will always go comfort when you're on your feet for 7 hours. So sorry.
I would make accommodations for you with the work that you have to do on the sideline. But hey, look, I see, some of our great sideline reporters, Holly Rowe, Molly McGrath, many other Rutledge. And, sometimes they're not, a lot of times they're not wearing sneakers. And, and they have challenging shoes that are far more challenging than you getting a pair of the comfortable, Cole Haan, Johnston and Murphy, whoever it might be, shoes that maybe look a little more appropriate with your suit.
I was waiting on that because Katie George, who worked the national championship with me, high heels. And I asked her, how in the ever-loving you-know-what are you wearing high heels for 6 hours down here?
Yeah.
Well, she's half my age. That's how. There you go.
Oh.
It's just 16 cuts on her right foot, right?
And I was going to say, to be fair, you've spent some time in the doctor's office with your various foot and ankle ailments, but now we're far afield here. So, okay. Well, I appreciate you representing Utah and the comeback that they're bound to make, because we all know in the Big 12 the next year, it's all about whether you win your close games or not. I mean, the teams that win their close games finish high in the standings. The teams that don't finish at the bottom. And typically that switches from year to year. That should work in Utah's favor next year. I think it'll work in Kansas' favor this year. And then we'll have to see if Arizona State, if BYU can follow up on their good seasons. Now, BYU is one of the teams that's in the Sweet 16, and because of their fairly recent move into the Big 12, they're in the Sweet 16 in basketball. 4 conferences represented there. By definition and by rule, we end up getting more than that in football. If we go to 16, that would be it. And then, there's talk about what further consolidation of conferences and realignment might include. From a big picture perspective, and I'm going to tie this back to football, I'm not bothered by by the fact that we've got primarily the big boys in the Sweet 16 here. Now, when you get a Cinderella story, when you get, a team coming, FAU, a couple of years ago, even San Diego State coming from the Mountain West, making the Final Four, that's a great story. If we have it in football some year with Boise State, winning a couple of games and getting to the semifinals, even making a national championship game, that will be great. But for me, it's not necessary. It doesn't define my enjoyment. It doesn't diminish the enjoyment for me, because it's sort of like when a team is good every year and people say, I'm tired of them. And my question is always, why do you tire of excellence? It's okay to root against it if it's not your team. If someone is dominating year after year, it's great and part of sports to watch them, to want them to be knocked off. That's great. No problem with that whatsoever. But I don't have to have it in order to appreciate the event. And you can probably see where I'm sort of going with this. I've long said that even for the last conference champion, which certainly Boise State would have met the criteria easily this year, but I think there needs to be a threshold really for all of the conference champions. Now, most of them will by default reach it, but sometimes the so-called group of five, outside the Power Four teams in football, might not reach a threshold for which you have to reach to be considered for the playoff. Meaning you have to be ranked within the top 16, or you have to have X number of wins against FBS competition. I'm riffing and making it up as I go along. I don't know exactly what the criteria would be. Probably would be better if it were somewhat data and analytics driven, that they have to be within the top whatever of the metric that we have determined is the most appropriate one. But the larger point is I don't have to have it. I want them to be in if they've earned it. I don't want them to get a participation place in the thing. When Boise State earns it, I'm all in, man. Let's go. Try to win the game. It's great. Or anyone else, UNLV, whoever else it might be. But it doesn't diminish anything if they're not for me, and therefore I don't have to have it. And I'm not really bothered by the fact that we don't have, and we almost did. We almost had Colorado State, in the Sweet 16. But I don't have to have it. We don't have a Cinderella. When John Calipari, who's taken 3 programs to the Final Four, is your double-digit seed Cinderella, you don't have Cinderella.
No.
And, especially with the money that they have at Arkansas, and he showed up with no players and they put together a nice roster. Would be a better one if it had stayed healthy. But do you feel like, do you need that for your enjoyment in football or basketball, or does it feel a little bit like the carrot to appease everybody in football?
Well, as far as football goes, give me the best teams, Rece. I mean, give me the 12 best and let's go swap paint, as Keith Jackson used to say. And is it going to go to 14 or 16? Eventually it will, because it's money. And when I talked to Greg Sankey about this 6-8 months ago, he said there's new faces now, that are decision makers. It's not the same conference commissioners. It's not, there is a new, athletic director at Notre Dame now, a different voice. So you're looking at from where we started with 4 to where we are now. It is different, and people have different opinions. And then I took away from that and talking to Commissioner Sankey, RD, is we're going to 14 at some point. We're going to 16, and the biggest part is one word: money.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. And whether that's good or bad or indifferent, and how you feel about it, that is what drives big boy college athletics, and especially football. Now, to the NCAA tournament, I think part of the glamour and the glory and the appeal of the NCAA tournament is that everyone's got a shot. And you had this remarkable run of VCU, right, where they got in over our good friend Seth Greenberg's Virginia Tech. If you saw it.
And can I say it? I have committed to myself to say this every time, because I say this about football too. Performance does not validate or invalidate selection.
Yeah.
VCU that year, and look, they were awesome once they got to the tournament. Should they have been in the tournament? No. They should not have been. But they got in and they played great, and good for them, because even if someone like me thinks, you didn't merit inclusion, you should have been on the opposite outside of the cut line. It doesn't mean you have to give it back.
Right.
I mean, if you walk down the street and you're walking the dog, you look over and there's a $100 bill there and no one around, there's no way to know who that might belong to. You do it, you invest it, you make $1 million. You don't have to give it back. So I'm not suggesting VCU should have, out of some altruistic method, say, well, no, we do not merit inclusion. We should not be in. No, man, you say, hey, you know what? We caught a break. Life is about catching a break. Let's go make the most of it. And that's what they did.
The $100 bill, I'm going to the coffee shop across the street and donating it to a waitress. There you go. That's number one.
That's good. Okay. I mean, okay. So perhaps I should have, perhaps I should have used a better, perhaps I should have used a more benevolent metaphor, but I think you know what I mean. You find a stroke of good fortune. You should capitalize on it somehow.
Yeah. Guess what? You know what? That $100 bill is going in my wallet because I got to pay for tuition at Oregon. There you go. Right. So sorry, Whit, I got you here, Lanning. I'm with you also. There you go, man. But RD, that is part of the beauty of the tournament. But now, because of NIL and the portal, that combination that we have now, I think Jay Williams drilled it. And that is, man, NIL and the portal is going to absolutely decimate the feel-good stories of those VCUs, or George Mason with Jim Larinaga all those years ago making that Final Four run. I do miss that right now coming into the second weekend. Now, we don't have that remarkable feel-good story. We were close with UCSD. RD, I had the Tritons going to the Sweet 16, and that wide open look against Michigan. If that bad boy goes down, we might be having a different conversation. But guess what? It didn't. And so UCSD and a heck of a team is out, and we don't have that, quote, feel-good type underdog story. Heck, America, we are underdogs. We weren't supposed to win in 1776, but we did. Right, we're built on it, man. So, hey, George Washington had those cannons at the mouth of the Hudson pointed right the river going, you want some? Come get it, right? And they did, and we won as a dog. We're built on it, but we don't have it this year. But that still doesn't take away the remarkable endings we have with Derek Queen in Maryland, right? And, you have Florida and UConn coming down to the wire. It's still great games. You just don't have that remarkable feel-good type story.
I don't think it's ending though, Ian, and I'll tie this back to football. I don't think that just because we don't have it this year, we're not having it, because you mentioned UCSD, they would have had to win another game. Colorado State came close. There are a couple of others you can mention. It's going to happen. It's going to happen again. That's not going away.
That's awesome.
But yeah, it's, I saw someone mention the other day, all of the Power Four teams are allowing or taking the players and so many of these teams that are still playing in the Sweet 16 have key players who started their careers at a lower level of basketball.
Iona, right?
But Rick Pitino told me something hilarious a couple of weeks ago on College Game Day. Walter was warming up. It was right before Florida was playing in the SEC tournament for a championship game, actually. And, I was like, what happened there? And he goes, well, I offered him $1,100 to stay. But boy, he's sensational, by the way. But there will still be teams who's Walter Clayton, who's Mark Sears, who's Chaz Lanier, who's Sion James, has not yet left. And they will lift their teams up, and then maybe they'll go pro, or maybe they'll go there the next year. But there will still be teams who do that, from the Mid-American Conference, from the Mountain West, from, whatever other league you might say. That will still happen. I do think it's far more difficult for it to happen in football because of players transferring up for more money, which is fine, by the way. That is not a criticism. I have zero issue with players elevating their stock and their status, but you need more players, in football. So I think it's a little bit more difficult for that. And the idea that that football will become more inclusive if we expand the field, I think only gives, for the most part, a participation trophy to someone else. Yep. It doesn't really open the door for them to win. Now anything can happen. And I would say really they can pull an upset. I mean, anybody can step on a banana peel and lose. I mean, that's obvious. So teams from those smaller conferences with with maybe younger, smaller, physically smaller rosters, they can win a game. But asking them to win, what would that be? Asking them to win 4 games, win a national championship, from outside is probably a hill too tall to climb. This sort of brings us to thinking about how to get your football fix this time of year. For years and years and years, really for our whole life, it's been the spring game.
Yep.
And the spring game has been opportunities for alums to go back to campus, hopefully on a nice day there, to reunite with old friends, to be able to get a peek at their team. If you've got a new coach, most famously when Nick Saban went to Alabama and they put 92,000, which I think at the time, though it's expanded, I believe that was a sellout there. Then it was like every seat in the house was filled. To see this new wave of optimism. All of that sort of part of the heritage of spring football in college football. Now you see teams that are saying, okay, we don't want to play. We don't want people to scout us in the transfer portal, and then leave it to our friend Deion Sanders to come up with an idea that I don't believe, and look, I hope I'm wrong, but I don't believe it will get approved this year. He was talking about playing, 3 days of practice or a competitive scrimmage against someone else, which is an idea that's been out there, for early season or week 0 games for a while. But doing it in the spring is something that, if my understanding is correct, and I believe that it is, that is not allowed in NCAA bylaw. And I guess there's a oversight committee meeting that in theory could give some relief and allow them to do that this year. That would be very quick and probably unprecedented in terms of the NCAA, changing something that quickly. That would be that significant if they were to allow that. But all of it having offered the reasons and the bureaucracy and the things that will probably stop it from happening this year, I kind of like it. I think it's a great idea, man. Just because I'm saying I doubt that it happens this year doesn't mean that I won't be very happy if it does, and think there's probably a good idea down the road. Now, what I would do, I think, and I know it wouldn't be quite as compelling for television, but maybe you could keep it a little more geographically logical, and that might be more challenging for Colorado, because with the animosity with Colorado and Colorado State, you probably don't want to play that. In the spring, you probably don't want to do that. But maybe you could use it as an opportunity for generate some revenue for the area. Like you play an in-state school that you wouldn't typically schedule. Something like that. And you could structure it any way you wanted to. You could play straight football, for the first half, maybe without the kickoffs to avoid some of the risk of injury, and then you could make it situational in the second half, or you could make it situational for a while and then play the second half competitively. So you have a winner and a loser at the end, and it, feels like a big game. There are a number of creative things you could do with it because they do allow those scrimmages in basketball, because they're always, there's always word at the end of the secret scrimmage between, two teams who wind up in the Final Four. Oh, they played, in a practice in a closed gym back in October, and Florida won 104 to 100 or whatever it might be. So there's precedent for it in other sports. I mean, basketball and football are obviously different from, the risk of injury standpoint. But I love the idea. How exactly it would be implemented, I think would be great.
RD, having covered the Cowboys for many, many years, I can tell you the difference between day 1 and those 3-day joint practices and day 3 is alpha and omegas, man. I mean, it is.
Yeah, I don't think they need joint practices in college because they've got so many guys. I would just advocate more of a game type scrimmage.
I did like Deion's idea of the NFL format. Look, day 1, when you go swap paint with another NFL team in those controlled environments, you're good. I mean, it's passionate. You're getting some work in. Day 2, what'd you say about little mama yesterday?
Yeah.
Day 3, man, that's like going to Waffle House on a Saturday night and it's after midnight. The fights are about to break out. Get ready because it's on. And so that's my number one concern, right? What would be of the 3-day. But to your point, I remember, Rece, when I was at WJOX in Birmingham, you and I had this very conversation, again, 20 years ago. And that was more to your point about right before the season began, right? End of fall camp. You go, if you're Alabama, you go and swap paint with North Alabama, and you pay them a little bit of money. You're not hitting your own guy. This has been dancing about, to your point, you're spot on, for a long time. Now Deion is just taking it to a whole other level. And it will make your team better. Absolutely. Even if it's not the 3-day, like you said, probably shouldn't happen. And because of what I just addressed also, it's going to get nasty come day 3. I mean, I don't care how controlled you try and keep it. They're going to go. I mean, I don't remember a 3-day session that there wasn't, forget pushing and shoving, going hockey. The gloves came off. But for one game, I think it'd be outstanding. And I think the fans would love it. But let me throw this back at you. Going back to Matt Rule and Steve Sarkisian and Nebraska, Texas, and others, you are exposing your roster where you found this. Let's go Rashad Johnson. Remember Rashad? You remember Rashad?
Sure, yeah.
0 star. Saban saw this skinny safety from wherever, Alabama, right? And
Intelligent.
Look at you with a deep dive.
No, the reason I remember is because when I was a little kid, quick story time digress. I grew up in a little town, or before we moved to Muscle Shoals and before the tornado came through and blew away a small town called Guin. Lived in Guin, Marion County High School, and we played Selligent. By the way, my first 3 football seasons, I remember 3 consecutive state championships, including stopping future Auburn and NFL star Joe Cribbs on the goal line. He crawled into the end zone and probably claimed forever that he scored. He did not. He was stopped by the Marion County Red Raiders short. Anyway, I know where Selligent is. Please continue.
That's a deep dive. We got a Joe Cribbs. We got Auburn. We got Selligent. And we got a 10-year NFL vet, the former All-American in Alabama, all into one classic R&D story. Impressive, R&D. But my point is, Saban found this guy, right? He ends up as senior year, basically quarterback of the defense, spends 8-9 years of the Arizona Cardinals, another couple of years of the Tennessee Titans, and is now an assistant coach. I mean, those are the guys you're trying to hide. So if you're having what we're talking about here and what Deion is looking at, and you have that glorified scrimmage against another team, you are still exposing the Rashad Johnsons of the world that you did this deep dive on. And you have other coaches up there going, who the heck is 3? And how did we miss him? And what can we pay him? That's the downside that a lot of these coaches are looking at right now.
We keep beating this horse to death, and let me make a broader point here, because I think you're 100% right. And it's the reason that many of the coaches are citing that they don't want to play the spring games. And one of the things that we, meaning the enterprise collectively, not ESPN or not you and I specifically, but the sport, has tended to do is that you put Band-Aids on situations as they come up, rather than looking at sort of the all-encompassing or the holistic view of what's good, right, and what's best for the sport. So in order to do some of these things that we're talking about, the potential of, playing either a spring game against someone else or playing a preseason during camp scrimmage against someone else that, doesn't necessarily count on your record, and still protecting the hidden gems that you have from being poached from someone who's going to give them more money, more playing time, more prominent status, whatever it might be, quicker than they might get if they stay. Then the way to do it, you have to take the holistic approach. So along with this, what would stop that if a guy's under contract? Okay, if a guy's under contract, how does that have to happen? Okay, we have to decide who's representing each side, how it's orchestrated, what buyouts or transfer fees or whatever you want to call it, if you want to adopt sort of the European soccer model. I think the time has come, and boy, it is an undertaking. I'm not sitting here telling you that 45-minute or whatever, 45-minute podcast, and we can deliver the exact answers of how to do this. It's a massive undertaking, but a holistic approach is needed. If you're going to do some of these things, it would be awesome for the fans. If you're going to let Colorado and Syracuse play without fear of exposing players who are developing to being poached, then you have to have a way to guard against that. You have to have a way to allow these games to be played without, with minimal risk to reputation, and rankings. Like if you played, for instance, let's say, what if you had a top 10 team, some surprise top 10 team, they play a scrimmage and they're worried to death that the CFP is going to watch the the August scrimmage against a team from the MAC. You're trying to develop people. You only win, or maybe, heaven forbid, you lose the thing. Now people are up in arms about it. It's damaged your reputation and all of these fallout things. So you need a way to think about it so that people look at it like they look at NFL preseason games. If we do them, who cares if you win or lose? You're just trying to, get some reps in. How do we protect the players from being poached or protect the programs from having them poached? Okay, that's contractual. Because again, I don't mind guys moving up. Guys should want to move up, and guys that want to stay at their original school, good for them too. That's awesome. Everybody should have the choice to make what they think is best for them. But, maybe stopping some of the more unsavory sides of it, where you're getting people getting in the guy's ear and saying, hey, if you go ahead and leave now, you try to stop that if you can. Or if you can't stop it, which might be unrealistic, there are set contractual parameters of how that person
You change the portal window, Rece. That may be the easiest thing. There should not be two portal windows. And every coach that I've talked to has said the exact same thing. That second window, especially, after spring ball, let's say little Johnny doesn't win a starting spot, right? And little Johnny's parents and his brother and his aunt are going, he's starting, and little Johnny can transfer. But how do you replace little Johnny?
Okay, fine. But you're looking at it as so many do from the coach's perspective. What about Coachy McCocherson's transfer portal? Now, again, I don't mind the coaches moving up either. But, Will Wade leaving McNeese State was the worst kept secret in the world. He was gone. I had no issue with the way that Will handled that. He was as transparent as one could be. You've got Ben McCollum, a couple of quick moves. You got Darren DeVries, just got to West Virginia. He transferred portals out to Indiana as the head coach there.
So I'm not saying players should.
Okay, but I'm just saying we always talk about, the players' parents and these nefarious agents and these guys, doing this and that. Why is it okay for the coaches? Well, the answer is it is. It's okay for everybody. So what we need is what we have in business. We have agreed upon contracts that have to be lived up to or have parameters under which they can be bought out. And I think that for the players, because of their stage in life and the fact that it is at least somewhat still attached to going to school, I think that some more liberal escape clauses, but still punitive ones, because if you're getting some benefit, there has to be some payback, but a method of escape within that contract is reasonable. And I'm okay with your one transfer portal window, but something also needs to be done about how you hire coaches. If we're going to do that to the players, then let's do the same thing with coaches, because if they're the adults in the room, they can be called upon to act like them.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all, RD. And my big thing is the coaches that we're talking about also, the players should be allowed to make as much as they possibly can.
Absolutely.
But one window, and that way it's, to me, you're avoiding as much poaching as is going on right now. And if you want to set a window where coaches can or can't be hired, I'm fine with that too. I don't care. But I think that one window would help when it comes to spring ball and everything else.
Everything is being professionalized, and the NFL has a pretty good model for handling all of this.
Think?
I think that the one exception that I think probably wouldn't be as easily accomplished and probably maybe not even right for college football is, and you correct me if I'm wrong because I know your brother has coached in the NFL, but I believe I'm correct in saying that everything has to be agreed upon and granted by the current team employing the coach if it is perceived to be a lateral move.
Correct.
An upward move is different. I'd probably advocate for more relaxation of that at the college level, because just because you're a offensive coordinator at one school in the Big Ten doesn't mean it's the same type of job as the offensive coordinator at another school in the Big Ten. There's some upward mobility within the conference that might not be as obvious in the NFL. So I would encourage latitude there. But if we're professionalizing this entire thing, and we are, and we have, and it has been for quite some time, then I think this is what I'm talking about, Ian, with a holistic structure. If we have these types of parameters, okay, of course you can go court a coach and talk to the agent. That's business. You can do that. But how can we come up with a holistic structure that organizes it so that coaches and players stay with their current teams through the end of the season, that there is no great benefit to going to your new job earlier? I guess there always will be to some degree with recruiting for head coaches, and I get that. That might be unavoidable. But if there is no real tangible benefit to leaving before the end of the season, then everybody stays, they complete that season, and then we have this period of time where coaches make their moves, players make their moves, and then everything resets. So I don't know.
Spring games back, yo.
Yeah, I know it.
Come on.
It's harder. It is harder to do in college. I acknowledge that. It's a difficult thing to do. And if you are in the position of hiring a new head coach, particularly, time is of the essence. I understand that too. Or else the first year almost becomes a bit of a throwaway. You want to try to avoid that if you can. But, the good of the whole enterprise is probably more important than that. Now, each individual athletic director, it's not incumbent on that individual athletic director to take into consideration first the health of the entire enterprise. His job rides on hiring the right coach. And getting him in place and getting him going so that he can be successful. That's always going to take precedence, and it should, for that person. But as we try to figure out some type of structure that's good for the entire enterprise, I think we can't be overly swayed by the individual stories, of like, well, if University of X doesn't get this coach in place by then, they're not going to have a chance to put together the roster they want in year one. Okay, well, maybe if we have this type of parameter, then everybody sort of understands that it's going to take a little time again, and that and if you've also limited this window to after everybody's hired, then the new coach has pretty much the same shot as the sitting coaches do at working the portal and getting people to come with them. So, all of these things are not simple. They're not easy. I don't proclaim to have all of the answers, but I do think the holistic approach of governance would be good for the enterprise. It would be good for player movement. It would give some organization to player movement. If you had contracts in specified ways to pay I'm going to call it a transfer fee or whatever, or a buyout clause or whatever, that, if Bowling Green is going to, buy out a Division II player, if Eddie George is going to get a D2 player to come, here's the transfer fee. Here's what it costs. And it's going to cost even more for Ohio State to take a Bowling Green player, that type of thing.
That makes all the sense in the world, RD.
It's hard to implement, though, and hard to get approved.
Right? And Ariel and everybody else, because it's a fantasy right now, in my opinion.
Yeah,
it
is.
It makes too much sense.
Absolutely. We're not close to having this happen, but I hope that at some point that it does, because the world has changed a lot, and a lot of us who grew up with this idea of players, like Jack Sawyer, who grew up wanting to go to Ohio State. It's all he ever wanted to do. He may wind up in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and I might argue that his time at Ohio State will be what he cherishes more than anything else. Maybe that would be up to him, but it wouldn't be unusual. But those are now the exceptions rather than the rules. It's not as if no one feels that way. It's not as if there are very few, but for the most part, a lot of guys, and it's fine, look at this as a means to an end. as a way to advance their careers, as give themselves the best shot at playing professional sports, best shot at getting drafted in the best position they can. All of those things, it's all okay. But
you know what?
it's no longer just, pulling Ian Fitzsimmons from small town Louisiana, turning him into a baller, and he gets drafted someday. It's not that doesn't. Rashad Johnson, that doesn't happen as often, as we feel like it once did. Maybe it didn't happen as often as we think, back in the day. Maybe I think it's always to some degree been the exception.
I think every major team has got a Rashad Johnson story, several of them. I mean, because there's just too many great players, and you can't find them all. They're all not 5-star. Some have to develop. Like, hey, Rashad, you get more love in this team show.
I know about that. What is going on here? Why is he getting all this attention?
We're going of thin hair, right? You can see getting all kinds of level. We got a Joe Cribbs. Joe Cribbs reference, which I got.
I better say this because all I said was that Joe Cribbs was down. Joe Cribbs was awesome. He was great at Sullivan, and he was great at Auburn, and he was great in the pros. He was a great player.
We cover your butt there, RD.
Yeah, I know it.
He did score on that play in high school.
He did not. Okay, he did not.
Let's get the pylon view. Let's get the pylon view, right? I mean,
there's no such thing as a pylon view in 1973 or 72 or whatever it was.
You know what the spring game did do for the diehards like us for college football? It gave us something to watch. It gave us something to look forward to in the spring, not just recruiting. Because I'm not a big recruiting guy. I mean, you famously told that great story about a made-up recruit. Remember that? Hey, we're going to.
I do. Yeah.
I deep dive.
All right.
What was that guy? What'd you call him?
Hugh Jazz.
Hugh Jazz. J-A-Z-Z. Hugh J-A-Z-Z.
S-S. J-A-S-S. Hugh Jazz.
He was like a running back. He was a running back
at Bristol Central. Yeah, running back at Bristol
he was
Central.
An Army kid.
Army kid. Nobody knew about him and said, "Who is this guy?" Yeah.
I mean, and then, folks, I'm not making this up. It's a true story. I mean, I'm not creative enough to make this up. I'm doing middays at Jocks in Birmingham. It's the middle of recruiting season, right? And RD comes up going, these lists, they don't know. So Rece creates Hugh Jazz, running back, 210 pounds, Army kid, just came over from Germany. And next thing you know, on recruiting boards, can't make this up, on recruiting boards, the 5th best running back in America was
Hugh Jazz.
Hugh Jazz. And then the next thing RD comes on, it says his younger brother Lars is going to be even better.
Hey, look, I would love to say that came to me. I'm sure I borrowed that prank from somewhere, but yeah, it was. We were as we tend to do from time to time. We're mocking.
The point is, we looked forward to those spring games.
We do. Yeah.
I mean, my first sophomore year at Alabama, we're living at 1102 Bryant Drive. It's dump, and these are some of the spring game memories. This just popped into my head. Cornelius Bennett and Derek Thomas come walking up onto our dump of our front porch. They pull in this beautiful black Mercedes, park in the driveway, throw my buddy Troop Rogers, my roommate, a $100 bill going, we have free access to your restroom all day for the spring game. He's wearing a black vest, right? Black Levi's, black cowboy boots, sunglasses, and all I did was go, yes, sir. I mean, that's the first time I ever met Cornelius Bennett and Derek Thomas, the late, great Derek Thomas. And where were they? Going to a spring game because it was an event, not just for fans, but also former players coming back home just to kind of hang out with the boys one more time. That's what spring ball did. That's what I hope it does again at some point. I don't know if we'll ever get back to that, though, RD.
And as it becomes further professionalized, maybe at some point we're going to have OTAs, rather than spring practice. Maybe we're going to have, maybe it's going to happen. These things will happen in the early part of fall camp. Yeah, just sort of follow the NFL model all the way. But it'll always have its own unique character. Okay, let's wrap up on this. If there was one team in college football, and maybe they will have a spring game, but that you would be most interested in watching them, seeing them, that you need a little fix of what they're going to look like in the spring, who would it be?
Ooh. Oh, you won?
Well, you can give a couple if you want to.
I want to see Kalen DeBoer year 2.
Okay.
And then, but that's 1B. just to get a fix. I'm actually thinking about going over there. I have a UFL game on the 13th in Detroit. I'm thinking about going over to Tuscaloosa just to kind of see and get a feel for what's going on there with DeBoer in year 2. The man's never lost wherever he's been. And so I'm looking to see if they're going to take that big jump in year 2 with his program. Number 1, though, Ohio State's got a boatload to replace. Starting, new quarterback, 2 new running backs. You got to replace Jack Sawyer. I mean, all the guys on the back end. I mean, it's you got Donovan Jackson, Simmons. I mean, they have a ton to try and figure out. Is Sayin going to be the quarterback, at Ohio State, which by all accounts, and it sounds like he's in the driver's seat right now. But
all the guys leaving are saying that he's going to be. That's usually a good sign because you can't fool
Will Howard say it's his time, right?
Yeah, you can't fool the players. Yeah.
So they know, 1,000,000% correct, RD. Mm-hmm. So I would say Ohio State 1B, year 2 with DeBoer at Alabama.
Mine would be, we mentioned LSU, but I feel as if I know largely what I'm getting there with Nussmeier and them filling some holes. That would be one. But I think the top of my list would be Oklahoma with John Mateer there and Ben Arbuckle as the offensive coordinator, and the pressure that's going to be on them, especially early.
Nagy comes as a GM.
Yeah. So, they've sort of overhauled their enterprise there, and to see Mateer stepping up, in level of competition, I'd like to get a peek at that. There are several others too. I mean, people are going to want to see Texas. You want to like to see Michigan also, because end of the year, Michigan with those wins over Ohio State and Alabama, did they sort of find a little something that
right.
Or new quarterback, whether that is Bryce Underwood from the very beginning or whether, they go with Mikey Keene and let, Bryce work his way in later. All those things I think would be pretty fascinating. So there's still some interest to seeing spring games. Do you have any Oregon gear to wear?
I could have gone and thrown on about 5 different sweatshirts for you, RD. But yeah.
Okay.
Malcal, the boys, Tosh, sorry. It was the first clean thing that I could find. But I will tell you this. People laugh at me, RD. You can back me up on this. What's some of the best sushi you've ever had in your life?
Chuck's Fish in Tuscaloosa. It's not, and you know what? It's easy. It's easy for a couple of guys who went to Alabama to have an affinity for a local restaurant. Here's what I tell people when I see the immediate recoil to this, and they bring in. They've got Chris Eddie's mom. Is master.
She's in there. Oh boy,
unbelievable! It's unbelievable. Woo. But the fish comes in like immediately. It's out of the water on the plane. It's there quickly. But it's easy for us to say. Jess Sims, Peloton star, college game day, Boston raised, New York living, goes there and says, "This might be the best sushi I've ever eaten."
Thank you.
I'm just
syndicated. I catch hell every time I bring it in the party.
I mean, it's because you can't. It's because there is perceived hometown bias, there.
Yes.
But you get Jess Sims.
It's
to advocate.
You just gave a wow because best sushi, Tuscaloosa, Alabama, can't make it up.
Well, you know what? If you get a chance, you can channel the words of Jess Sims and go try it for yourself. And you can look at it this way. You don't have to, you get to. Get to eat the sushi. Betsy, that was fun. Thanks for jumping in here. Thamel, follow Pete Thamel on the various social medias. You'll get the very latest and quickest updates on all of these coaching searches in college basketball, and not to mention as football continues to unfold. Pete will have it for you, but Pete on assignment. And Ian Fitzsimmons jumping in ably. You'll be on ESPN radio all over the place, as always, I'm sure. Thanks for listening to the College Game Day podcast. Download this wherever you prefer to get your podcast or subscribe and never miss an episode.